I'm Jared Wicks. This is the Heel to the Face podcast. Brandon, the Nassau Coliseum, home to a lot of historic wrestling. We're talking part of WrestleMania 2. We're talking SummerSlam, Brock versus Rock. We're going to want to know, so I'm going to give you some time right now to pick out your favorite wrestling venue, or at least a wrestling venue that you would want to go see WWE or any wrestling in, past or present. Give you some time there. I've got a few on my mind as well. We'll talk that, as well as the greatest match ever. Edge, Orton, Backlash this past weekend as the Heel to the Face podcast starts right now.
So silence your cell phones, hold your applause, and tune into the truth.
Oh, you didn't know? Your ass better call somebody.
Getting beat up by 9 guys in Syracuse, to me, there's not a whole lot of shame in.
From the 315 to the world, this is the Heel to Face podcast.
The cream of the crop! Wow, man, freaked out!
Follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at Heel to the Face.
I said, are you ready?
From Armory Square in downtown Syracuse, New York, let's send it now to Brandon and Jared.
Bad luck seems to be my middle name. They might as well tag me up with my buddies from Syracuse.
So this is the Heel to the Face podcast. My name is Jared Wicks. You can find me on social media at KRockJared. I'm joined, as always, with Brandon Clements. You can find him at Icebreaker21, and make sure, most importantly, follow the program at Heel to the Face. A lot to talk about coming off of Backlash 2020, the greatest match ever, or at least that it was billed going into it, Edge versus Randy Orton. And I'm going to give you this, Brandon, and this is what I thought when I was watching the pay-per-view this past Sunday, before Backlash got underway, because I watched the initial package that hyped up Backlash, you know, the video montage before every pay-per-view event, and it mentioned some pretty good matches, Steamboat and Macho Man, but it also mentioned matches like Andre the Giant Hogan, Rock and Cena, which obviously those are nowhere near the greatest matches ever, or even in the conversation. And after then watching the MSG microphone come down, as well as the referee and the bow tie, I realized that maybe we were reading this all wrong. Maybe WWE was not trying to sell us the greatest wrestling match ever. So the theme song for this pay-per-view was a new Panic at the Disco song. I think it's off the soundtrack of a movie, or it's the name of their album. It's called The Greatest Showman Reimagined. Yeah. And with the guy wearing the bow tie, with Howard Finkel doing the announcing, I guess, on recording with the old MSG microphones, it made me think that the theme for this wasn't necessarily the fact that this was going to be the greatest match ever, but that I guess the theme of this pay-per-view and this match was just trying to be, I guess, similar to Barnum and Bailey, the greatest show on earth. Now, no one actually word for word thinks that that is the greatest show on earth, but that is just a cool carnival-esque 50s, 1920s tagline, if you will, of time gone by. And wrestling kind of grew from the carnival lifestyle. It grew from the circus atmosphere. So maybe this is not supposed to be an actual legit greatest match ever, but was supposed to maybe be hearkening to the fact of, with the camera angles and everything, I guess just more like a fun take on wrestling's origins.
I guess. I'll be honest with you. I think you're stretching it a little bit. I think they were just trying to bring it to this nostalgic thing where I think it was cool to bring in the Howard Finkel, reading, Edge's description, and then Randy Orton's his description, like where he's from, the weight, all that stuff. That was cool. That was my favorite part of the whole thing. The microphone, the whole thing, that was cool. I would say they were just trying to. They were just trying to make it like a kind of a throwback, because these two are throwback wrestlers in a sense. Because
exactly. I mean, that's the point I guess I was trying to get at. They weren't literally trying to, I guess, say that this was going to be the greatest match ever. I think more or less, like you just mentioned, that's what I was trying to get at. Treat this like a throwback. Everything so far has had a theme because wrestling has been so weird lately. I guess the theme for this, because of the Panic at the Disco song being the greatest showman reimagined with the whole atmosphere, it's kind of a throwback to the carnival lifestyle and the origins of wrestling.
Let me just ask you this. What did you think of the cinematic part of the whole match? I'll say this before you answer. I thought it was a good match. I don't think it was a great match. I thought it was edited pretty well from, watching it, being in the video and radio business that I've been in school and whatnot. I thought it was cut and done well. But my take is, and I said it earlier on Sportszilla today with Rayman and with Matt, and I said to them that you can't have multiple takes and make it the greatest match of all time. It's just something like you got to think. I always think of Undertaker and Mankind, that Hell in a Cell match '98, where Mick Foley and Mankind got thrown off the cell. That's one of my favorite matches of all time. You got the Bret Hart HBK matches. There's multiples, and then I always like the HBK Undertaker, especially the first one. Those matches were all considered really great matches. And then if you go back in the day, anything with Steamboat was really good because Steamboat was fantastic back in the day. To me, it was just okay. It was okay, good, but when you think about it, there's no way you could ever put it in that conversation, right?
Well, yeah, we kind of talked about that leading into Backlash. There was no way it could be the greatest match ever just because it's not coming organically. The fact that you already put that tagline in front of it, you said it perfectly today on ESPN Radio in Syracuse, that, the greatest match ever can't have 2 takes. That's cheating. Undertaker and Shawn Michaels didn't get a chance to have 2 takes. Nobody else has a chance to get 2 takes. Believe me, if anyone had a chance to get 2 takes or, film it twice and edit it out, we would have a lot more matches in the conversation of the greatest match ever. What makes those matches is the organic nature of it is what it is. We talked about it, I mentioned, with, one of the greatest games ever, Syracuse University a couple years ago, that happening organically. The same with Shawn Michaels Undertaker. That match at WrestleMania 25, that wasn't the main event. That wasn't match I would say that I was buying the pay-per-view based off of. I wasn't thinking that was even going to, be that great. I thought, it had a chance to be really good. Those are both 2 good performers. But with Undertaker getting up there in age and Shawn Michaels getting up there in age, you didn't know if you were going to get a good match or going to get a flop. I mean, with those guys, you never know. We got what I say, one of the greatest matches ever. It happened organically. It happened in front of our eyes. It wasn't billed that way. And that's why that is one of the greatest matches ever. John Cena and The Rock billed as one of the most better builds and one of the greatest matches ever in the sense of the atmosphere that is professional wrestling and what professional wrestling tries to do. And that's put, the irresistible force versus the immovable object, 2 icons of the sport, same as Rock versus Hogan, same as Hogan versus Andre. Edge and Randy Orton is more in that category of Andre and Hogan, Rock and Hogan. And I don't know how high in that category because still that's some pretty big shoes to fill. But it's definitely not when it comes to Steamboat, Macho Man, WrestleMania 3. It is not in that category.
No, absolutely not. I mean, anything with Steamboat, again, fantastic. He was one of the greatest performers of all time. And in some of the matches he had with Ric Flair back in the day, those are classics as well. And, I mean, Ric Flair's had some fantastic matches aside from the Steamboat matches. I mean, Ric Flair has been in, I would say, at least a dozen great matches over the years. And this Randy Orton Edge, again, I think you're right. I think it was good because of maybe the mystique of like, oh, man, these guys are legends. Like, Edge has been out of the business for 9 years. Randy's been around. He's still been wrestling this whole time. And, they were a team. They were rated RKO back in the day. Like it brought back some cool memories of watching it as a teenager when they were really hot. Like they were on fire, those 2. But again, the other matches you mentioned, 2 parts. No, there was no fans for this match, really. I don't consider the WWE, NXT or developmental talent as the fans. That's one part. Again, the other matches, they did it on 1 take. It was 1 take. You can't. It's one of those things. And pardon the. I'm going to read this. Think this quote completely wrong, probably. Jim Ross said this isn't ballet. You can't do multiple takes. This isn't a movie. This is wrestling. You can't do it like that. So, for what it was worth, it was probably my favorite match of the night. I mean, that's probably saying much because I don't think Backlash was that great of a show. Tell me, I don't think it was a good show. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I did my homework. I did go back and watch 2 Drew McIntyre versus Bobby Lashley matches from Impact, one from Slammiversary and one from a few days later. The one few days later, not the greatest, but the one from Slammiversary for Bobby Lashley actually in those rivalries because he was the main guy at the time, retained the belt and beat then Drew Galloway, now known as Drew McIntyre, 2 nights in a row. Those were the better, I think, of that match, I guess, back when they were in Impact versus their time in WWE. But everything else was pretty much, I think the Asuka Nia Jax match pretty much summed up the whole pay-per-view, ending in a double countout. That's pretty much how the title matches felt to me. I would say the best non-Edge Randy Orton match would have been Jeff Hardy versus Sheamus. I did enjoy that thoroughly.
I thought it was a decent match for what it was worth. I mean, I thought the build was better than the match itself. That's just me. The whole sequence on SmackDown this past week where Jeff Hardy, his urine went all over Sheamus.
Drew right in his face.
What's that?
Drew it right in his face.
Yeah, that was funny. I thought that was hilarious. I thought that was that's kind of going back to the Attitude Era a little bit. So that was kind of an Attitude Era kind of
I wanted to go back to the Attitude Era on that. What Jeff Hardy should have said is, "Are you a fan of R. Kelly?" And then threw it in his face. But that's if you go back to the Attitude Era. Just throwing this in.
That would have been pretty good. I will say this: the match that I saw on Raw this week, I believe it was offhand, it was Nia Jax and Asuka. I thought that was a better match. This on Raw.
Yes.
And here's the thing: I thought the cool part about that match on Monday Night Raw was John Cone getting involved. Nia Jax shoves him,
Yes.
and was about to DQ him or DQ Nia. And then Nia gets rolled up by Asuka, and then you see John Cone hitting the 1, 2, 3 fast, pretty darn fast. And it was funny because you got Samoa Joe saying that was a pretty quick count by John Cone. I mean, I thought that made that match better than on Sunday.
From what I read on Twitter, that's going to turn into some small little storyline. John Cone and Nia Jax apparently are going to have to answer for whatever happened what happened on Monday Night Raw.
Here's what I'll say, and maybe I'm wrong on this, but John Cone was gonna DQ her anyway, so who cares about the fast count? Am I wrong?
No. I guess, they're just trying to pull straws. I guess the fact that there was both the fast count, both the fact that Nia Jax was, interfering with the referee. You got to get something to keep this rivalry between Asuka and Nia Jax. It's not really much of a rivalry, especially because Asuka's not the greatest on the mic. You got to do something to, I guess, keep it fresh.
Here's what I'll say with Asuka.
Give her the belt.
Here's what I'll say. With Asuka, she's so good in the ring. Asuka is one of the best in-ring wrestlers, man or woman. Let's just put it that way. She's just fantastic across the board. But because of the language, she knows a little bit of English. She does. I mean, she tries, and I give her a lot of credit for it. But I think she needs somebody like a Paul Heyman, to advocate for her, so to speak, because the whole language thing, I think it kind of makes things a little confusing. I mean, people, they kind of, in a way, they almost joke with what Asuka's saying in Japanese. Like I think Charlotte Flair recently was like, yeah, I agree, yeah, kind of like, yeah, I think what she said, I don't really care for that so much. I think put somebody like Paul Heyman, or bring some sort of manager in to help her, with the have them talk for her, and she goes in the ring and does.
Bring in Funaki. She can talk for a very long time and translate that to Indeed.
I love Funaki, by the way. Now, I got to ask you, what did you think of AEW this week? What are your thoughts?
Well, before we get to AEW, we still didn't talk quickly about Daniel Bryan versus AJ Styles, staying on the WWE. Yeah. Daniel Bryan, AJ Styles, that wasn't on the pay-per-view. That might have been, and we said it ahead of time, probably the best match WWE-wise of the weekend. Yeah. Me, personally, I think that wasn't on the pay-per-view because maybe they're going to take this further into the next pay-per-view, meaning, they built up Edge versus Randy Orton so much. Obviously, the pay-per-view didn't need Daniel Bryan versus AJ Styles. And now that they were left off this pay-per-view, do you see anything more happening with Daniel Bryan and AJ Styles in this little rivalry, trying to maybe one-up the greatest match ever at Extreme Rules or at SummerSlam? Or do you see AJ Styles moving on to a new opponent?
For the love of God, I hope they continue this, because they gave us, I think it was an hour. I didn't have the stopwatch on, but I think they gave us almost an hour of SmackDown.
It takes an hour, maybe 50 minutes.
That was pretty much the whole show on SmackDown. It was fantastic from start to finish. And here's the best part: I don't think it was edited either. So that's kind of cool too. With everything going on.
No, it wasn't live. Nothing in WWE has been live.
But how edited do you think it really was?
No, that.
How edited do you think it was, though? I mean, I don't think it was. If it was edited, it might have. They might have. It wouldn't. It definitely wasn't. They definitely didn't do it in 2 takes. You know what I mean? They did it all in one shot for sure.
Well, those guys obviously can do that as well, and I think that's the thing we're talking about, is the fact that that was going to be the better match just based off of the people involved. It was more organic. It wasn't being billed. You know what I mean? If there's, back in the day, I guess you're an NFL fan, and we kind of made these comparisons to Super Bowl in the past. There used to be a time, and sometimes there is, where the NFC Championship or the AFC Championship game is the real Super Bowl because it's really the two teams. The Super Bowl is more of a formality of, the teams that are just going to end up together because of how the playoff structure works. But sometimes it's the Patriots and an undefeated record versus a team that's got one loss. It's the Patriots and Kansas City Chiefs like a couple years ago. Or it's maybe two NFC powerhouses, the Cowboys and the 49ers back in the 90s, whoever won was going to win that year's Super Bowl. Yeah. And I think that's what we get with Daniel Bryan and AJ Styles, is if that was a semifinal match, if that was a quarterfinal match, it would still been just as good. It would have been the best match. You didn't even have to be for the championship. It could have been on the road to the championship. That's how good those two guys are.
And they make magic every time they're in the ring. I mean, I've said it on multiple occasions. AJ Styles makes everybody look good. I mean, let's be honest. And Daniel Bryan's the same way. So when you put those two elements together, you're getting yourself a barn burner. It was a hell of a match. And I hope WWE keeps the momentum going, because it's one of the few things that keeps me from changing or fast forward on the DVR side. Because right now, I don't really watch SmackDown or Raw. I kind of fast forward just to get the gist of what's going on, and then I'll read stuff later. But it's usually NXT and AEW for me, and it's AEW by a long shot, because AEW to me is the best thing going in wrestling right now.
Well, by a long shot, but NXT is trying to get their foot back in the race again, because I don't know if they did this strategically or not, but July 1st and July 8th is going to be Fyter Fest, the free pay-per-view, if you will, for AEW that'll be on TNT. But July 8th, NXT has announced that whoever wins next week's triple threat match for the North American Championship, Keith Lee, Johnny Gargano, and Finn Balor, will fight title for title, Ultimate Warrior Hulk Hogan style, NXT champion Adam Cole versus North American champion, to be announced on the July 8th version of NXT. So if we could skip forward to July 8th, and it's Adam Cole versus Keith Lee for title, or let's say Adam Cole versus Finn Balor, whatever, versus Fyter Fest. And let's say that night of Fyter Fest is for the championship, Jon Moxley versus Brian Cage. Which one are you watching first?
Moxley and Cage. Moxley to me he's the best thing in wrestling right now. He's just, everything he does, whether it's promos, in ring, like everything he does makes me want to see what he's doing next. It's almost, to me, it brings me back a little bit to the Stone Cold Steve Austin era a little bit, in a different aspect, because Stone Cold was such a rebel back in the day with going after Vince and all that. Jon Moxley is in a different aspect of it, but he's a rebel as well. And I'm always interested to see what crazy stuff he's going to do next. And I also, I didn't know a lot about Brian Cage going into his debut, at Double or Nothing. I didn't really know him that much. So I went and did some research, and he's pretty damn good. And he's got a great physique. He's got Taz in his corner. I'm looking forward to that.
McMahon would love to market.
Oh, for sure, because he just has the look. But he's not. He cut a promo with Taz this week on Dynamite. I thought it was fine. I thought he did good. I think he was fine with that. And then his in-ring is pretty good too. So I'm really excited to see the style of his and Moxley. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. But I'm going to watch the other. I'm going to watch the other one after. No doubt.
Do you like Brody Lee now trying to start a rivalry with Colt Cabana? Do you think that's below him? Do you think he should try to stick to higher people on the card than Colt Cabana after his championship match against Moxley?
Yeah, I think if that's one thing I would nitpick about AEW right now, that's it. That's some aspects of it, because you do see that that Mr. Brody Lee, he picked up he helped the girl who looked like the magician. I forget her name off the top of my head. She's from Georgia. After her loss to the zombie chick. What's her name?
She's the star of the show. I forgot it's something with an A. It's Aya Rose. I mean,
here's the thing. After the match, like Brody Lee, like in his crew, the Dark Order, there, they escorted her out of the ring, helped her out. So I think she's going to be a member. And then I think the only thing that's good about this Colt Cabana thing is he needs to be in the Dark Order, because what's he really doing by himself? You know what I mean? So in that aspect, it's good. But like, let's just get through it as quick as possible, because having this whole crew and Brody Lee's just kind of sitting there, is it even mid card? I don't know. I think he needs to be elevated to the top of the food chain. Maybe he needs to challenge Cody for the TNT title. I mean, that might be a good move.
So, two things I want to finish off this show on this week. We're moving over, as we teased in the opening, the Nassau Coliseum on Long Island. It looks like, its end might be sooner than we thought. So Nassau Coliseum has been remodeled its tenants, main tenant being the New York Islanders, moved out some time ago. This past season, and I think last season as well, they've been playing just a few games there while they play at Barclays Center as well, because Barclays Center wasn't built for hockey. But the Nassau Coliseum has been remodeled. It's been called NYCB Live. It's been turned into more of a concert venue. The point is, it's not a full-time home for any tenant. Obviously, the Islanders are building a new place in Belmont Park by Belmont Raceway. Yeah. So the idea that Nassau Coliseum is on its way out or going to have limited use anyways, but it was announced today that Nassau Coliseum's current owners are actually going to just put the stop on it right now because of the COVID-19. They lost out on some G League games. They lost out on some finishing Islander games, some concerts I think they were supposed to be here this summer. So until they get an actual owner, which again, because the arena is on its way out the door, might not happen, it looks like you might have, let's say, not been able to see your last event at Nassau Coliseum. Because I was hoping actually to maybe go down there and check out an Islanders game or something before it was too late. But with that being said, that place hosted most recently the Evolution pay-per-view, Rock versus Brock, SummerSlam 2001. It hosted the first hour of WrestleMania 2. So it's got a lot of wrestling history. WCW's venture into New York City's market because they couldn't go to the Garden, really step on WWF's toes. They did go to the Nassau Coliseum one time in the late 80s, early 90s. So when it comes to venues for professional wrestling, past or present, if you could go see wrestling at any venue, America, out of America, past or present, Brandon, what are you picking?
I got three choices that came to mind. It would be a pay-per-view, like an in-your-house style pay-per-view, or a Monday Night Raw from the War Memorial in Syracuse. Back in the 90s, that would have been cool. Because I was a wrestling fan back then, but I never went to the arena like during that time. So watching, going to WWE Live later, it didn't give me the same feel. So it's like, I want to go back to like 1998, kind of style of like we're at a Monday Night Raw in your house pay-per-view, or an NXT takeover from the War Memorial. It's been refurbished. We all know that. We're from here, we're born and raised in the area. It's cool to see the War Memorial, the old barn, getting a nice tune-up. So I would love to see it there. As a Cowboys fan, I'd like to see it in Cowboy Stadium. That'd be cool. In AT&T Stadium, that'd be fantastic. And then
Where was WrestleMania 32? You should have made it happen.
Yeah, a little too much out of my price range. But I'll give you one last one, and this one's gonna give you kind of a look. Pastime Athletic Club.
Because you've never been to a 2CW show.
No, so exactly. I've never been to a 2CW show, and I've seen old clips online. That place is cool, man. It'd be a good place to go catch a wrestling show.
Well, you'll have your chance come this December. We'll talk about that more or less on a future episode. We talked about 2CW having a reunion show in December. We talked about that announcement last week. Obviously, with a lot of time between now and then, we'll talk about that again. I would say high on my list of places that I can't go to anymore. I should have gone when I had a chance, but things just never happened. Was the Continental Airlines Arena? It was, I think, the Brendan Bryce Arena, the Continental Airlines Arena. Finally, I think it was the Izod Center. But that place hosted a lot of big WWF early Summer Slams with Rick Rude and Ultimate Warrior. If I'm not mistaken, that might have been the Match Made in Heaven, Match Made in Hell Summer Slam. I know it hosted a big King of the Ring back in 2001, where Booker T made his WWF debut at the end. It hosted Dolph Ziggler's Cash In. It hosted SummerSlam 97, Undertaker versus Bret Hart. It hosted various other pay-per-views, and it was always just something about, I think Madison Square Garden is special, and I was lucky enough to go see my first wrestling show at Madison Square Garden about a year ago, right before WrestleMania, the night before WrestleMania. But something about the Continental Airlines Arena in New Jersey, it always just had great like mix of like New Jersey, New York City wrestling fans coming together. And just it hosted a lot of big events, that Continental Airlines Arena. Like I said, it hosted, I'm pretty sure it hosted a Rumble. It hosted SummerSlams. I don't think it hosted a Survivor Series, but, just a lot of big events. Still on the bucket list would be the Tokyo Dome, obviously, for a Wrestle Kingdom New Japan wrestling show. I think that would be awesome to see a wrestling show there. And if I had to throw one more, I guess ECW Arena. I know it still exists, but going back in the day, ECW Arena in Philadelphia, for an ECW show. And if I still get a chance, I know Evolve hosted a show there. I think Survivor, what was it, Royal Rumble weekend or Survivor Series weekend a couple of years ago. I think they were trying to go up against AEW, one of AEW's pay-per-views, so they hosted the 10th anniversary of Evolve from there. I would definitely go check out a show there if I get a chance. There's lots of arenas I'd want to go see college basketball at, NHL, NBA, Chicago Stadium, Boston Garden, all those places. But wrestling-wise, those are the ones I pick. So we move on from that to my final thing is WWE. They love marketing. And lately I think they haven't been hitting it out of the park, obviously, just because, obviously I didn't attend WrestleMania, so I'm not really interested in those as seen on TV, WrestleMania in your house, those kind of shirts. But just recently they came out with a new line of shirts just the other day. I want to get your opinion on these. The Rookie Edition shirts. They look kind of cool. They're kind of acid washy looking, old school. You got Terror Rising. You got Mean Mark Calois. You got DDS Dr. Isaac Yankem. You have even one that I actually had to look up. I wasn't even really familiar with because this is pre-WWF. What the Edge's original gimmick. Sexton.
Oh.
Yes.
Yeah.
Steven, I'm now.
Those are some good shirts.
So, so you got, like I said, Isaac Yankem, Terror Rising. You got the Ringmaster in there, Stone Cold Steve Austin, just the Ringmaster Steve Austin. Mean Mark Calois. Which one of those shirts? I forgot the Edge one. It's on the tip of my tongue. You should know it. I know it's Sexton. That was his name. It was something Sexton. He used it before he was in WWF on the independent scene. Of all those shirts, so I think I got to go Mean Mark Calois.
I'm going to go with Terror Rising.
Terrorizing.
Yep.
I mean, that's a good one too. So kudos to WWE for actually putting out some pretty decent shirts. You know what I mean? Yeah. In that sense. Before that, they were putting out some classic match shirts. I don't know if you saw that as well. They've been putting out match, old WrestleMania 17, Austin versus Rock with WrestleMania 17 theme. I think they had Eddie Guerrero versus Brock Lesnar from No Way Out 2004, right before WrestleMania 20. Kind of like the match card, like the build-up, kind of shirts. I guess maybe getting ready for Edge versus Orton, kind of, Titan versus Titan. So they got some good shirts there. But I think these Rookie Edition shirts, I might have to pick one of these up. Like I said, Terror Rising, Dr. Isaac Yankem, and Mean Mark Calois. If you get a chance, and this is something I actually been learning watching old WCW pay-per-views. I've moved on to a lot of old WCW. I never realized how big Undertaker was in WCW. Now, I knew he was in WCW, but under the impression of the fact that in the 90s it was such a mystery with The Undertaker that, I thought his time in WCW was, essentially kind of like Triple H's, a little more under the radar. Yeah. But finding out that he feuded with a lot of big guys, watching him go up against Lex Luger with Paulie Dangerously as his manager, he was on pretty much every pay-per-view event that I've been watching from 89 to the early 90s before he left for WWF. And I just thought, that is something that they couldn't get away with nowadays. For the fact that Undertaker's gimmick lasted, I would say, into the 2000s, where people really treated that guy with such mystery, despite the fact that prior to that, he talked a lot. And, and he was in WCW without any of the makeup, without any of the stuff. Yeah. And the fact that he was still allowed to get away with, I guess, going into WWF and pretty much being like a completely new person.
Yeah, I mean, it's a sign of the times because things are a little bit more closed down, so to speak, compared to nowadays. Everything's out there now. Like, you don't really get any spoilers anymore because it's all on the Twitterverse and the internet wrestling community. So going back to the late 80s, early 90s, it's a whole different thing. I mean, for example, there's payphones back in the day. You know what I mean? Like, you would fax things. You don't text. You're on those big phones back in the day. So I get, that's why people don't really remember unless you go back on the network and watch, because until you told me that, I forgot he was even in it. I knew he was, but I forgot about it until you mentioned it, to be honest with you.
And Kane is a good example of that too, because I remember in the late 90s and the early 2000s, people wanted to know what Kane looked like under the mask, and it was like you would go to scour the internet to try to find a photo of Kane, accidentally his mask falling off, not realizing that he was Dr. Isaac Yankem, completely unmasked on many WWF events that you could watch. But, because they weren't big-time events, they were like in your house pay-per-views or they were old Monday Night Raws. Before the network, it was hard to get our hands on those. So even though I kind of knew that he was Dr. Isaac Yankem before, because Dr. Isaac Yankem maybe only had one pay-per-view match, I still couldn't get my hands on that pay-per-view because my local video store didn't have In Your House 8. You know what I mean? So, and it never went on to DVD. And obviously there was no way to watch old Raws from 1995 and the year 2000. Those were few and far, unless you taped it personally yourself. Yeah. So yeah, back, we were very wondering what Kane looked like under the mask. There was all this mystery of what these people look like, despite the fact that they obviously wrestled unmasked and in front of big crowds for a long period of time.
It's technology. I mean, we've come so far. I mean, look at what we're doing now. I mean, we're on our computers or cell phones recording a show. Who would have thought this, 25, 30 years ago?
Definitely. Well, next week we'll have more wrestling to talk about, kind of a slow week. I imagine we're going to get into a slower week. So hopefully someone will do something. Maybe we'll even talk Slammiversary, Impact Wrestling, July 18th. It's getting a lot of publicity in the wrestling world for who is going to be that former world champion that comes back. Don Callis, who runs, I guess, the announcing side and a lot of the promotion side for Impact Wrestling, has said it is somebody who you didn't even know was on the market. So we'll leave you at that. For Brandon the Icebreaker Clements at Icebreaker21 on Twitter and myself at KRock Jared, this has been another week's edition of the Heel to the Face podcast.